Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Juliana Rizbacki. I am a master's student at Mercyhurst University, and this is my presentation of my senior thesis, or my master's thesis. Sorry, not my senior thesis. I am getting my master's hopefully this Sunday. So with that, I want to dive right into it. I covered guided notes in secondary social studies classrooms. Let's make sure my computer is, there we go. So originally my thesis was focused on conducting a study around the students that I had access to in my student teaching with my co-op in the classroom and everything like that. However, due to the coronavirus and school closures, my data is incomplete and I was not able to finish my research or collect enough to have enough data to really argue what I was starting to see with trends. Because of this, I altered my thesis, and I will go into that as well as what is included in my altered thesis. And with that, you will see more of individualization happening on a broad scale by implementing learning styles within guided notes, as well as covering examples of what you can include in guided notes to kind of hit more of the learning styles and kind of reach more students while working with the same material. Originally, my thesis wanted to answer the question, which group of students benefits most from the use of guided notes in inclusive classrooms? Like I said before, at Gateway, I was just blessed with a really diverse group of kids. So with this, I had 92 participants. I had more than that in students. I was just focusing on 3 specific classes, 2 global connection classes, both 10th grade, both same track, both academic, and then a required American government class that had kids with learning disabilities, as well as gifted kids and students that wanted to be there, students that didn't really care about politics. And with that, I was able to be more flexible with how much I could alter the guided notes and everything like that. So that was really my strongest situation. However, coronavirus and data is incomplete, not able to finish my study. Originally, I would have focused on the different tracks of students and how they were benefiting from guided notes based on their note accuracy, content quiz results, and overall grade average during the section. So when I'm in A, like my style is A, B, A, B, A. A is guided notes, B is writing notes on your own without a change of lecture style. My PowerPoints were very organized based on a connection to the guided notes. With that, I would judge that if there are multiple assignments during that time, that let's say the students do really well on an essay when they don't have guided notes, but have terrible grades on their final exam for that unit. However, when they have guided notes, they struggle to complete their essay or anything that isn't directly note related. However, they excel at their test results and their content quiz. It's really interesting to see, and that's why after a while I started to add in the overall grade average for the assessments during the periods between guided notes and non-guided note sections of units. I was starting to see trends, however, not enough data to really make any solid claims. Because of coronavirus, I'll say it over and over again, I had to adjust my thesis, as we all had to adjust something in our lives. So going with guided notes, I created a packet for future teachers and current education students that encourages the use of guided notes with connection or with the implementation of learning styles, multiple intelligences, and how that can influence how you design your notes. With that, I also included that, as you see at the bottom of your screen, because this is a screenshot of part of my thesis. This is just the first few pages. With this, you start to see graphic organizers and everything like that, and how you can include that in guided notes without abrupt change. So with that, the main question I want to answer is, how can guided notes be designed to better reach students? So with that, I focused on 3 main theories to influence how guided notes were designed and what elements I included in them, specifically in this packet, but also in my original study. So with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, I focused on how different assessments and different questions reached different students who might be stronger in different situations. So with the timeline or using graphic organizers, you're able to reach students who have visual spatial intelligence, as well as kids who have linguistic intelligence, because it's putting it in a visual perspective. So usually with this, it's more focused on the instruction style and how you teach it. So if you want to reach kids who are better with music, sometimes you use a music video related to your content or anything like that to intrigue them. Something like that isn't as applicable in a guided note situation. So it does focus more on visual, logical, and linguistic. But as soon as you start to get into David Kolb's learning cycle, you start to see a little bit more of implementation of what you can include based on theories. So up here is just a screenshot of the part of my thesis where I am just giving the basics and I give a graphic for this. This is David Kolb's experimental learning cycle. With this, there are 4 different spots in the cycle. So as I'll explain it as much as I can. There are 4 different spots in the cycle. You can start anywhere, but wherever you start, you have to follow the cycle. It is a cyclical process. Each of those is controlling how you are interacting with your material. So concrete experience is more of like that hands-on right there. Reflective observation, more of the thinking, the internal process. Abstract conceptualization, there we go. That was a struggle. That's more that problem solving and active thinking. So with that, you'll see above where it says accommodating, CE/RO. I don't know if you, on your end, my video, it should be good. So with that, you'll see that, there we go. It's AE/CE is accommodating, and essentially how you can sum this up is students and individuals that have an accommodating learning cycle really benefit from doing and thinking. So with Kolb's theory, there are a lot of words and you can get lost in it, and it's much easier to just think of the simple 2 words that he gives you. So with converging, instead of getting caught up with everything else going, students who fall into converging do well with feeling and doing. And that's as simple as that. This is really easy to implement in guided notes that have graphic organizers, as well as guided notes that have certain visual aids and elements. Let's say one of my examples that's going to be coming up is using a flag when you're teaching a history section. So let's say you're teaching about the history of Japan and you're going in like 1980s or something like that, but it's just the modern day red circle, white flag. It's not Imperial Japan. With that, you would have the students at the start of it where it says something on their guided notes about the title, where it's like Japan, Industrial Revolution, anything like that. And then you have the Japanese flag and maybe a map, like a geographical map of Japan right next to it. Just using those visual aids with Kolb's learning cycle, that's how you can implement it more. That's how you can find the doing as well as the observing. And then, there we go. And the other theory that I really relied on to influence how my guided notes were created and what they considered was Rita and Kenneth Dunn's learning style theory. So with this, there are 5 stimuli that teachers, instructors, whoever is considering the individuals have to look at and question to see how their students would learn best. So you have environmental, emotional, sociological, physiological, and psychological. So environmental is going to consider elements like sound. Is it a quiet room? Is it a noisy room? Light, is it warm light, really dim lights, really bright? Temperature, hot, cool, seating, stiff seats, or really comfy sitting on a couch. And then they go more into that, do students who have these, what when students have these stimuli, how do they react and what is the best way to help them? So with this, a lot of students will like a quiet classroom that's a little chilly and staying by themselves or in a pair. With that, you can kind of look at this for more for the learning style of the actual instruction, but also considering what students like. So some students are going to want more structure. Guided notes can become much more structured as well as much more reflective when you start to get into the psychological stimuli. Okay, moving on, I want to just reiterate a lot of studies that I read and just really got into when I was preparing my own research, just screamed of the benefits of using guided notes in the classroom. Ample evidence shows that inclusive classrooms benefit from guided notes, specifically students with learning disabilities. With this, I wanted to see in my study if it was just the students with learning disabilities in those classrooms, or if I could reach other students by using guided notes and actually benefit their grades. The studies below were good, and I appreciate all the advice and everything that I got from them. However, they are limited in the small participancy groups. Most studies on guided notes, at least in secondary education and not college education, are normally under 20. With that, there's one study that it was really helpful. However, the researcher only had 3 students in her study. So a lot of the research that is out there on guided notes is limited to the amount of students, but they do have a consensus, there we go, that guided notes improve students' note accuracy, help students receive higher grades, and improve content comprehension. So with this, I'm going to start going into the basic structures you can have with guided notes. So for my suggestion in the packet that I created for future educators, I give 2 base level structures to build from. These can both be combined, but are the only guided notes that I discuss that can stand on their own and still be productive. There's the question and answer style, the traditional one, and the fill in the blank, which is a lot easier if you have less content, if it's just for that day or something like that. Questions and answers are a lot easier to implement over an entire unit or an entire section, and they are exactly how they sound, the same way as if they were test questions. Questions are typed out, and the students during lecture will write the answer and fill in the blank. They're listening to lecture and they fill in the words that are missing in their guided notes. So I recommended using multiple elements that you can do in addition to those structures. So the first 5 I'm going to discuss are really good for social studies classes. So I use the timeline all the time when I was teaching. It really helps students kind of place and get the context of where they are and when events are happening, so that they realize that, let's say one event happens in 1761, and even though the other one, and it's a law super similar, happens in 1764, a lot of kids will get them mixed up, and then it kind of ruins the just flow of the story when you're teaching history. So timelines are a good way to keep kids understanding where everything is placed. With that, I love using maps as well. Geographical more than topographical are normally helpful in social studies classrooms, as using maps, again, just kind of gives kids and students the context of where they are. I've noticed that they're also super helpful if you're discussing something like when I was doing my World War II unit with the German aggression prior to World War II, where they annexed Czechoslovakia and part of Austria. It was really interesting for the kids to see where on the map that was, and I had them color code it as we got to that lesson, and they could see that where the land was. It wasn't just some abstract area in Europe. It was more, they got that ability to see how much land was taken. And then political flags, as I mentioned prior, with using the Japanese flag, they're just helpful to kind of remember where you are in your lecture. If a lot of classes I've noticed as you get into world history, you're going to bounce back between multiple countries or multiple nations, and it helps students kind of keep flowing with who they're talking about and everything like that. Interactive visuals could include the previous three, but is just a very broad term. So an example of an interactive visual is using an image of a famous leader and leaving a spot for the student to fill in the name of said leader. So one example I had is that in my classroom, again, when I was doing World War II, I had the Russian flag, and then I had a picture of Stalin, and then just underneath, who is this? And the kids had to write Joseph Stalin. And they had to draw in the Russian flag also on the guided notes among the questions and answers. So it adds a different layer. Interactive visuals, though, when you use them in guided notes, should be close and positioned to where they are relevant. So again, like let's say I had Stalin, I wouldn't have put Stalin with Imperial Japan. I would have kept him with Russia because I'm trying to give kids the context for them to understand where everyone is. So with that, though, interactive visuals can really be anything that aren't timelines, maps, or flags. All of these, except for interactive visuals, can be placed either at the start or at the end of your guided notes, depending on what you want. And then again, And finally, discussion questions. These can be put at the start or at the end if you want students to start thinking about the material prior to getting into it. Treat discussion questions similar to an agenda of what you would want answered. So with this, I would always start off a discussion question at the start and then go into my question and answers, and the students were not expected to answer that until after the unit was completed. So even though it was at the start, it was something that was discussed after we finished the section in class, not in their notes, but was something that the students thought about prior and could activate prior knowledge. So additional elements, and bear with me, these are the last 5 that I cover in the packet that I created. These are going to be graphic organizers that you can include in your guided notes without having abrupt change to your system. So a lot of teachers will use guided notes and graphic organizers separate, but there is a lot of benefit of just keeping those in the same packet and not separating them. With graphic organizers, you're able to reach the students who are stronger with visual spatial intelligence and logical intelligence. It's easier to reach these students when you use something that is a visual aid, as it helps break up that kind of linear feeling of going through history when you're just talking about what happened. This breaks it down to what is important, what should they care about. And then they're like, oh, I understand. This is what happened, the series of events, when you break it down like that. So with these, I'm going to have, these are all screenshots from my example graphic organizers in my packet. The series of events chain is pretty similar to exactly how it sounds. Just putting each event, students can either write what happened or they can draw what happened depending on what the event is or what they're talking about. And then underneath, they explain why each event led to the following, creating that cause and effect mindset. Then you have a historical frame. This is super similar to a story map that you see in language art classes. It just breaks down the basics. Where are they? What is the event? When is it happening? Who are the main players? What is the main problem? And what happens? In the key episode in events, it's the big thing. So let's just say we go back to World War II. Events, World War II, German invasion of Poland. Where? German and Polish border. When? And you would continue with that. Participants, you could put Hitler, and then you could put, or you could just put like Germany, Poland, and you're going through like that, problem/goal. Hitler wants to claim Polish land. Polish land is its own independent country. Key episodes and events, you can say 1941, invasion of Poland, specifically the treaty and everything like that, appeasement. And with that, students can kind of break it down a little bit more so that they understand and kind of get more of the nuance of what happened. With this, it's really going to help visual learners as well as logical learners. In my packet, I only include 1 to 2 matched learning styles or intelligences, but that does not mean there are more. There always can be more out there. And the next one is a simple Venn diagram, super easy to just pop right into your guided notes. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's exactly as it sounds, and it is helpful to just kind of put, usually at the end for review, but if you want to put it between 2 topics, so let's say you're transitioning from the Spanish Civil War to the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, you might want to have a break there, where while those might be in the same chapter of your textbook and in the same section because of times and everything like that, kind of having a little break there to review the content you already learned or to get into what you're about to learn and kind of like activate prior knowledge. Next one is multiple points of view. This is helpful in areas, in topics that have multiple different players and influences considering it. An example I used was when I was teaching GC2, where GC3 was World War II, GC2 was going into American Revolution, into the French Revolution as the coronavirus hit. And we actually did do this one, not related to the study, but I did use it in the classroom, where I just straight up, I put American Revolutionary War. That's the main event, that's the topic. Perspective, colonist. Another one, patriots, loyalists. And then a final perspective, modern Americans. And what they put in perspective, so instead of it saying perspective, you would put who that's supposed to be. And in the box, students fill out what their opinions and perspectives would have been of that event based on the context of where those people are from. This really kind of helps with empathy and finding a little bit more of that, intra-intelligence of the multiple intelligences. And finally, the last one is the family network tree. It's super similar. It's just a family tree, but can also be used for when you're going through things like chains of command, royal families, academia mentors. So if you want to start covering ancient Greece and Socrates and Plato's and everything like that, and you're like, who was whose teacher? Now who was whose teacher? This kind of helps flow and also helps students understand why these people have similar ideas, but also when they are existing. So a lot of people, specifically ancient Rome, ancient Greece, they just hear all of these names and they forget that it's hundreds of years and thousands of years old. And they just think everyone exists at the same time. Using something like the family or the network tree kind of helps students put in context when those people existed. This is really helpful for a lot of those academia influences, not always academia, more like mentors of any situation. This is going to help visual as well as logical learners. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. I will be posting all of my sources in the the about box of YouTube of this video. Please leave any questions or comments in the comment section and I will get to them this week. Thank you so much for watching this and I wish you all the best. Okay. It's not stopping. Why is it not stopping?